want to raise anti-racist kids, we have the perfect guest for you today. So I'm going to go ahead and invite her in, and I'm super excited for you all to meet Tabitha St. She is an anti-racist educator, and if you care about raising anti-racist kids, she's going to be the perfect person to talk to. Hi, Tabitha. I was just introducing you.
Hi, it's so great to be here. I literally just realized that I did not take notifications off my phone. So I'm just going to do that right now. Okay, awesome.
And I'll just tell folks a little bit about you from your bio. There's so much more to it, but I feel like I could go on for days talking about all of the incredible work that you've done. So we'll just give a quick overview. Tabitha is a Trinidadian-American mom, writer, and award-winning artist and organizer, and a leading voice for anti-racist parenting. She's also one of the women who spearheaded the organization of the Women's March on Washington on January 21st, 2017. And like I said, I could go on for a very long time about all of your accomplishments and the incredible work you've done. But thank you so much for joining us, Tabitha. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you all.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about anti-racist parenting. So I know a lot of folks in our community are really committed to raising anti-racist kids, and some are just starting on this journey. So we want to make sure that everyone can walk away with some actionable tips and ideas for how they can do this work more authentically, or really start at all. So to start out, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What brought you to anti-racist parenting, and what has this journey been like for you?
So I was a mom. I had my first son 9 years ago, and I always involved in justice-minded work. Before this, I was a fashion designer, and I worked in the area of sustainable fashion. So I was always sort of like centered around justice, thinking about equity. And my partner and I, we had always been talking about social justice kind of over our son's head and around him. And when he was around the age of 2, he misidentified his race. And that was kind of an awakening call for us that we needed to find ways to take this knowledge and all these learnings and so forth and make it not just age appropriate, but also kid appropriate as well. So since then, I started writing a column called Raising Anti-Racist Kids, where I just started sharing about my learnings and what we had been struggling with my son. I now have 2 kids. My daughter's 4. And over time, we started getting outreach from library systems and schools and so forth to bring this work into their own communities as well. And I think my personal journey with anti-racist parenting has been one, and if it's one thing I hope that parents can sort of learn from this, is that sometimes it's like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes you're learning and you're growing and you're doing really amazing and you're having great conversations with your kid and you're doing all the things you have to do, and then you realize that, wait a second, like I skipped this, or I still have my own learning that I have to do. White supremacy is all around us. It's in the air that we breathe. And it's very easy to fall back into habits of white dominance and so forth. So if it's one thing that I want parents to sort of learn from this, is the consistency of it is definitely needed, but to also give yourself grace on this journey.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that 2 steps forward, 1 step back can feel like that in a lot of areas of parenting. This is no different. And it's also a lot of areas of activism, right? But yeah, especially with kids, I love that story about your 2-year-old, just because it shows how aware but also often misguided kids can be if we aren't being very intentional about these lessons, and sometimes even if we are, right? So like you said, with the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I think it really is about consistency, and also giving ourselves grace. We're all going to mess up. We all have, if we've been doing this work for any serious amount of time, and we all to do that. So whether that's in your parenting or your advocacy or your teaching, giving yourself grace is so important. But let's say, we might have some folks watching this who maybe haven't quite thought about raising anti-racist kids, or maybe think that kids will just naturally kind of pick up anti-racism. Why should parents be thinking about raising anti-racist kids in an intentional way?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is because studies show that kids are ready to talk about big topics like race and anti-racism before adults actually think that they are. And the kids babies actually start noticing racial differences from as young as 3 months. They start distinguishing between races from as young as 3 months. So we are actually doing a disservice to our children by not creating spaces for them to be able to have these conversations, to be able to process these observations that they're having all around them. If you're raising your kids in a bubble, then like yay for you, then they're not internalizing messages from around them. But most children live in the world and they're internalizing messages from the media, from ads, from who makes up their classroom, from who their teachers are, from who their caregivers are. And all of these things are informing how they understand race and how they understand anti-racism as well. So we are actually, so even if kids don't have the language to sort of have these conversations, creating a space for them to understand that you can come to me with these questions, you can come to me with these observations, and we will talk about it together. Something that we talk about often is that when you create a space for these conversations as kids get older, their own cognitive development starts to change and starts to grow, then you'll see the changes over time. A couple of years ago, there was a war going on, and we attempted to talk to our son about the war. And my partner, he studies this, so he went into like this long explanation about the history, and we felt pretty good about ourselves that we were like talking about it. And my son was like, Dad, I don't understand anything you just said. Your sentences were way too long. And now he's 9 years old, and we sit at bedtime and we talk about ableism and we talk about social justice issues, and he wants to talk about it and he wants to ask questions and delve into it. So don't get discouraged if you're trying to have a conversation with your kid at a young age. It probably just means that your approach needs to be shifted a little bit, that you need to think about what do I need to do to make this more kid appropriate. But as they grow older, their own development is going to change over time.
Yeah, I love that example, because I think no matter how knowledgeable we are, sometimes it can be hard to translate these things into, kid-friendly language and using metaphors that they will understand. So I think that's, so important to think about, but it really is sometimes trial and error.
Yeah.
Just try it and see, do they get it or not? And then you're going to learn over time as you practice, as you let them ask questions, and sometimes let them guide the conversation. So I love kind of that journey of learning for you and your partner, as well as for your kids. So that's the process, right? That's the process of learning and unlearning anything, especially something as complex as anti-racism in the society that we live in.
Right.
Let's say, a parent is interested in doing this work. They haven't done it before. Where should they start? How to get started on this?
So we have our 6 building blocks of anti-racist parenting that we teach. The first one, and it's intentional that this is the first one, is continuous learning. And that means that the parent themselves, the caregiver themselves, has to be committed to that process of unlearning and learning. We mentioned this before, that we live in a society where white supremacy is all around us, racism is all around us, and we have been taught this way over time. So taking that intention, taking that time to do that unlearning and learning through books and podcasts and conversations and so forth is critically important, because we're only able to teach our children within the limits of our own knowledge.
Yeah.
So continuous learning is very important. Community action, taking it into the community, making sure that you're following the lead of local organizations that are already doing the work of dismantling systems of oppression is very important. And also being aware of what it means to the difference between being an ally and being an accomplice, that you're not standing on the sidelines and going like, yay, you do it. But when it's time for the hard work, you're kind of like ducking out. You're really getting into it and you're really putting your privilege on the line. We talk also about consistent conversations. We spoke about this before. They need to keep coming back to it over and over again, tweaking your approach, having grace within yourself. Also, having the capacity to be able to say, I don't know the answer to this right now. Let me learn and I will come back to you. Or if your kid is old enough, being like, yeah, let's learn together and let's talk about this together. Reflective media is also very important. Surrounding your kids with media that reflects the multiracial worlds that we live in. We're huge fans of shows like Dee and Friends and Oz and Karma's World and all these really amazing kids shows that we have available to us right now. we're also intentional about the environment that we expose our children to. If everybody in your community, if all of your friends and your family and so forth are white, then your kid starts to think that that's what the world looks like.
Yes.
And they're internalizing messages about that as well. And the last one, which is absolutely not the least, is parents and caregiver modeling. We have to really embody the anti-racist values that we want our children to be able to exhibit. We have to be able to live it, because, you know, sometimes you talk to your kids till you're like blue in the face, and they're looking at what you do so much more than what you actually say.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think those are so helpful, like concise and clear, and makes a kind of a really simple roadmap, I would say, for parents to get started. Not easy, but simple kind of to follow. And it's a practice, right? That's why we call it a practice. It's going to take time and it might be uncomfortable at first, but I love kind of those building blocks, that simple kind of framework for parents to get started. That included like a lot of really good takeaways, I think, but is there anything else, any other like best practices or takeaways that folks can start doing right now that, you know, like an action step that they can take immediately?
I think libraries are a good place to start.
Yeah.
Reading to children is a really good place to start. Using books as a tool, not as an endpoint, but as a tool to help you start conversations is a really good thing. Our sort of all-time favorite book to talk about anti-racism with young kids is Our Skin, because they sort of have a cadence of questions as well that you're able to pause in your reading and you're able to ask your kid these questions. And you know, you can read like a couple pages at a time, but what's most important when you're reading books is creating that space for conversation, that space for openness with your kid. We talk about encouraging a spirit of questioning with your kid, which as a parent is sometimes hard, because if you're encouraging a spirit of questioning, they're going to question you as well. But
Yes.
encouraging them to question systems is really important as young kids. Encouraging them, you know, when we're talking to our kids, you know, having open-ended questions, keeping sentences short, all these things that probably parents already do in their everyday lives that can be infused into anti-racist parenting as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Those are so helpful, I think, for folks to have something tangible to walk away. And I love the idea of, you know, inviting them to question, even if that means they're questioning you.
Yeah.
Because the beauty of that is once they start, I find once kids start questioning you as the adult, they become more open to being questioned too. And I think we need more young people growing into adults who are open to question, who are open to pushback, open to learning. So, you know, when they are able to call others in, I think they're more receptive to being called in when maybe they're doing something that isn't quite aligned with the values that you're trying to raise them with. So
Exactly.
love that so much. Definitely love starting with books, starting at the library. There are so many good picture days that just, especially in the last few years, that just like create so many more options for jumping into conversations or just generally offering representation. So really, really a good place to start. Where can everyone learn more about you and your work?
If you go to the website raisingantiracistkid's.com, you'll be able to find my newsletter where I just did a piece about how to use Dee and Friends and Oz to talk about equity. They have this really incredible clip that just beautifully illustrates the difference between everybody getting the same thing and everybody getting what they need, which is, I think, a really important thing that kids need to understand as they start to understand what equity is. So join my newsletter, join my mailing list, and that's where like I put out the workshops that we do, the trainings that we do. We have a really amazing one coming up, Spring Anti-Racist Family Day, with the Brooklyn Public Library and Ben and Jerry's. That's coming up pretty soon in May. So look out for information on that, and follow me on social media, Tabitha STB.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everyone goes and joins that newsletter. It sounds like a really good resource. I think kids in like really understand the idea of fairness, but teasing out that kind of equity versus equality can be hard. So I love that you have resources for that. So everyone, go join Tabitha's newsletter. You will not regret it. You're going to get tons of good information about anti-racist kids and raising anti-racist kids. And also be sure to follow Tabitha on social media because, again, great content, great learning experiences. Tabitha, thank you for your time today. I am so grateful for the beautiful work you're doing in the world, and for you taking some time out of your day to help educate and inspire our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here with you.
Awesome. We'll talk soon, Tabitha.
All right. Take care. Bye.